What's up, family, and welcome back to the channel. Last week, we had a very interesting conversation on Black Nonbelievers next door, where I pulled some information from a report that Black Nonbelievers did in partnership with some other organizations and shared some of the quotes from that report of the experiences of Black nonbelievers. And so to kind of build on that, because we had such overwhelmingly positive response to that video, I want to build on that by actually sharing the rest of those comments that are in that survey. But also just sharing the actual details of the survey. So that's what we're going to be doing in today's conversation. So if you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the alert notification bell, consider joining our community either through Patreon, through the YouTube membership program, and of course through Discord, because hey, we're there and we're actually building community in Discord. I cannot overstate that. It is an incredible feeling to be actually building community right now. And then, of course, check out our merch because it's some of the dopest in the game. And yeah, that's just me saying so. And by the way, you kind of get to see a little more today. Normally, when I try to open my blinds while recording, it makes it look super duper dark. But today, you get to be distracted by the cars driving by because I'm looking at this too, and I kind of like the view. All right, so let's jump in this conversation. I'm actually going to literally just kind of read through this report, and we'll probably break this down into three or four videos. And then once we're at the end of the report, I may continue this series on a little more just to push this. Some of you already know I got to participate in a documentary earlier this year that hopefully will be coming out next year. And one of the things that this documentary really hones in on is of course, the rise of non-belief in the U.S., but specifically around Black people. So this is or African Americans, however you want to say it. So this is it's a hot topic issue. It's a hot button issue, and it's one that's close to me. It's one that people want insight on. Because even though the Black community in this country is a minority community, it is a highly influential community. And I think that's something that we've seen, really in the past, to be safe, I'll say at least within the past 100 years. And we could probably add 2 or 3 decades to that. But at least within the past 100 years, black art, African American art, has become a centerpiece of American culture. In a way that it is often used to communicate ideals that are often in line with the mainstream populace, which is very interesting to me because it's a whole nother conversation. But a lot of our artists are very conservative in their viewpoints of the world, but a lot of the stuff they put in their music is very liberal. So it's a very interesting thing, interesting dynamic. That's a whole nother other video. But let's jump into this. All right. So I told you last week when I did part one of this video that this survey was called the U.S. Secular Survey. And I found it absolutely phenomenal. This was done, I want to say, with try not to say the wrong organization because people are um, they're picky about that. So I want to say this was the American Atheist and who were working with Black Nonbelievers to do this. And if any of y'all know the actual ones, you can say so. I see the logo, but I'm not that good with logos. And it's a 26-page document, and so it's not very long, but it's rich with information. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to start reading some of the things in here, and then I'll break in between to kind of share some thoughts because I did have some thoughts because that's what I do. All right, so the U.S. Secular Survey was a groundbreaking 2019 survey of nearly 34,000 non-religious people living in the United States. Now, of these 34,000 participants, 891 identified as African American or Black, comprising 2.7% of the survey sample. Now, they did a previous reality check called Being Non-Religious in America report, which provided an overview of the data gathered through the U.S. Secular Survey, focusing on the lives and experiences of non-religious people, including atheists, agnostics, humanists, freethinkers, skeptics, and others. This brief will more closely focus on Black non-religious people, a group that is far too often overlooked both within non-religious communities and within our society more broadly. Isn't that the truth? And then just to kind of drive this point home a little bit, because sometimes when the words used are like overlooked, you may not identify with that word. Say, well, who's overlooked? I didn't overlook anybody. What often happens, one of the subtle nuances that people aren't always in tune to, is that the biggest way that Black people get overlooked is just by not being included. And when I say being included, I'm not just like, hey, you're invited to show up, you know what I'm saying, type of thing. But inclusion goes a little further than that. It's inviting people to show up as their authentic selves. Which of course you can go back to the W.B. Du Bois video that I did and kind of wrestle with double consciousness, and that does make it a little hard for people, for some African Americans to even wrestle with what is my authentic self. I know it's something. It wasn't necessarily a wrestle for me, but it was a wrestle for other people who knew me growing up. They couldn't determine if Darante was Black or white because I speak a little different, and I'm not into everything that other people are into. But I can assure you, white people don't see me as a white person. Asian people don't see me as a white person, and so on and so on. So I've always authentically been me. But the issue comes in when my identity is assumed. That's a great way to say that. When my identity is assumed, you can be including me while excluding me. So it's almost like including me as long as I meet these predefined assumptions that you had about my behavior or my presentation. Um, and again, that's not something that I think that people actually do on purpose. These are the consequences of being socially irresponsible with colonialism and imperialism. These are the results. You have a dominant society for a while, and you have a society that's an oppressed society for a while, living under the same roof. It creates social dynamics as well as social perspectives, so that even when people are part of the dominant society and they see the problem and they want to help solve the problem, they may not necessarily have the tools to actually know what solving the problem even means, and I think this is an issue with Americans. Is Americans want to know who Black people are before they deal with Black people, and that's how you get stereotypes, and that's how you get these problematic caricatures, and then that's also how you get this discomfort when groups in good faith are trying to work together. The tension, the abrasion, the conflict, if you will, often comes in is because, well, I didn't expect you to be like this. And it's like, well, you shouldn't have had any expectations at all because you didn't know me, you know. And so sometimes that's what it's like. And so, and it sometimes come from the most well-meaning people, because in most cases, what they're trying to do is not see color. And then by not seeing color in that sense, which I just find that to be a very interesting way. I find it to be a very interesting solution. When people say, okay, well, what we're gonna do is we're just gonna not see color, it makes me wonder, what type of parent were you? You know what I'm saying? Um, Feels like you were likely to parent if two people are fighting over something. Well, just nobody can have it then, just not going to see color. Let's just remove it, which is typically conflict avoidance. But you're not actually avoiding conflict. You're further dehumanizing someone else, especially because if you're a part of the dominant culture, then of course color doesn't matter to you because you're a part of the dominant culture. This is why sometimes when people talk about racism in other countries, they often use language that's 100% inaccurate, because it's a different language over there. So like when you're dealing with racism in a country like Africa, where the majority, or sorry, not country, continent, like on one of the countries on a continent like Africa, such as Ghana, you know what I'm saying? Um, when you start investigating racism, well, obviously, what you're not going to be looking for is black-white racism, right? And in most cases, what you're going to be looking for is that word, ethnocism. I don't think that's it, but it's actually another word that doesn't have ethno in it. What is it? Xenophobia? That might be something in there. But yeah. So you're dealing with different dynamics. So the social dynamics here um, uh, are color coded because the difference, we created color codes, and we put people with certain colors in the minority class, or yeah, in that minority class, therefore making color only a subject of issue for them. And so, when people, well-meaning, try to say, well, I'm just not going to see color. Well, it doesn't matter if you see color or not. It doesn't change anything. Your worldview isn't shaped around color because you're not on one of the bad color codes. It makes me want to pull out the Peter Griffin meme right here. But so, and I know that was a lot to say that, but I wanted to highlight that because sometimes when people think, like, oh, black people don't feel included, what does that mean? When I see them at all of these things, but sometimes that inclusion aspect is not just us being there, but us being there having to conform in order to stay invited. You know, which is, as a corporate professional, this one thing I always have to be mindful of when I'm in meetings, or if I'm at parties or things like that. People who are part of the dominant culture can drink and cuss and all of these other things, and it's not a problem. But I'm aware enough of my society and has learned how to navigate that it's almost like that scene, the first scene in Game of Thrones, not Game of Thrones, but House of the Dragon, when everybody was drinking at the table and Corlys put a hand over his cup and was just like, nah, I'm good. It's like he's learned, like, this is something that black professionals, we learn, because then you could be hanging out with your coworkers, they're cussing, they're drinking, all of a sudden you cuss and you drink, and then they're offended, and now you've lost your job, and these are the realities. And so these are some of the things that people may mean when they talk about being overlooked, right? Um, and this is stuff we talk about in our Sunday sessions, not even just about racial things. And I think I've done a video about getting away from treating people the way you want to be treated, because ultimately that's what kind of creates the problem. When you're treating people the way you want to be treated, you're not getting their input on it. And so then you're making the way you want to be treated the standard for the way they want to be treated. And you've just not had that conversation. And so, and this is for all of my allies, which I have a lot of great allies out here. I will always keep pushing you to just have more conversations, talk to people, ask questions. Don't assume shit. Assume, if it's a stranger, treat them like, treat them in the sense like they're a total stranger. No book you have read have given you any insight on that individual. And so the best person who can give you insight on that individual is that individual. And so that, again, that works not just in race, but in all things dealing with relationships. Okay, so I didn't mean the rabbit trail that long. Okay, so in addition to presenting data about this population, we will provide recommendations for secular groups that seek to more fully engage with and support Black non-religious people. And I like to throw out here, and I'm going to be doing this throughout this whole series, so go ahead and get ready for it. Black Nonbelievers is why I really started this particular series, is to support them in the work that they do, because it really has been their visibility that has allowed me or enabled my own vocality. Because as a black man living in the South, it's pretty risky coming out as an atheist. But Black Nonbelievers beat me to that by over a decade, and they're out here and they're making it easier for Black people to identify as non-religious. And so if you have not checked out their organization yet, I encourage you to do so. I will be including their information in the description, and also ways that you could financially support and donate, because, hey, we need it. All right. So it brings us to our first quote in this report. So they have these quotes kind of staggered out. Some of these you would have heard in the first video. Some of these will be new. But this one is from a female in New York. Being a black woman, people almost always assume that I'm a Christian. And then, of course, as a Christian, I never realized that because it was not, it was always a right assumption. Anytime someone assumed I was a Christian, and they would always say things like, "Oh, I can just tell. You just have, it's that smile, it's that joy." And people do it to me now, and they have the same reasons. I can just tell. It's that smile. It's that joy. You must be a believer. You must know the Lord. And it's like, nah, bro, that's just me. It's just me. And now you do, and on this side, you can kind of feel the dehumanizing aspect of that, where people can't even realize that you happy just with yourself. I don't need nobody else living in me for me to be happy. I'm good. You know what I'm saying? All right. So while data about non-religious people is very limited, this is all the more true for Black non-religious people. National population surveys have found that 3% of atheists and agnostics identify as Black. And if we look at the broader religiously unaffiliated population, this percentage increases to 9%, and that's according to Pew Research Center from one of their surveys in 2015. And again, the link to this brief is also in the description. This is another quote from a female in Illinois. "I'm a Black atheist, which presents its own unique set of problems in a culture that rejects those that reject religious programming that the Black community clings to. Not being able to be out in my Black family, community, and in our cultural organizations is difficult at best." Absolutely. It's incredibly isolating. It is otherizing. You literally, you feel that. Imagine, like, here we go. Imagine knowing that you are a man, but being born in a woman's body, so everybody treats you like a woman and expects you to behave like a woman. It's almost like that being Black. When you're born Black, much of the community treats you like, no, you were born this way. You were born as a Christian. And for you to do anything else other than that is a sin against nature. Moving on. According to census estimates, 13.4% of the U.S. population is Black, and this was in 2019. So then religiously unaffiliated Black people make up approximately 2.1% of the total U.S. population and 16.8% of the Black population. Recent research shows that among Black Americans, 3% identify as atheist or agnostic. And let's see here. There's just a bunch of stuff in quotes. Although the U.S. Secular Survey was not a representative survey, the percentage of Black non-religious participants generally aligned with these numbers. However, because of the prevalent stereotype in our society that Black people are more religious than other groups, we feel it that it is necessary to further probe this issue. Thank you for feeling it necessary. Available data shows that Black people who do not believe in a God are less likely to identify as atheists. And I want to say that again. Available data shows that Black people who do not believe in a God are less likely to identify as atheists. But you will also find this Black folks who are same gender loving are also less likely to identify as homosexual. There are some interesting cultural dynamics at play here. For example, one study found that only 26.1% of Black respondents who said that there was no God identified as atheists. So literally, that's 26 out of 100 atheists who decided who would identify as an atheist. So if you have 100 Black atheists, 74 of them you're not even going to know are atheists because they're not going to use that terminology. Now, that should be eye-opening for a lot of people, and as y'all know, since I've started this channel, I've done my best to kind of shed light on the fact that in spite of how loud religious people are, religion is in its decline, and the decline is actually steeper than most people think it is. And again, I think I talked about this on TikTok. This is a very interesting paradigm that the majority of people in the secular community think religion is the dominant worldview. Religious leaders don't think that. Religious leaders live on the other spectrum. We know that the religious worldview is the minority worldview. We understood that 90% of the people coming to our churches, and 90, I'm still being modest there. It's likely closer to 98%, but I'm being modest. At a minimum of 90% of the people who came to our churches did not embrace a religious worldview in their lives. They came to church as a cultural or societal requirement that also met some very social needs, or some very real social needs. But outside of that, they are sleeping with whoever the fuck they want to sleep with. They are smoking and drinking whatever the fuck they want to smoke and drink. They are living and let living by far and large. Religious leaders, we know that, but anyway, and this data basically just kind of highlights that the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence, type of thing. And so, yes, just because you don't see a bunch of black people running around calling themselves atheists, it doesn't mean that there aren't a bunch of black atheists out there. And I'm sure that that's not just to the black community. I'm sure that's more communities. And this is the one thing that I'm really trying to encourage everybody to do. You have a lot of valid reasons for your intuitions, but they are not reliable, and that's why we lean into critical thinking. So when you say, but I haven't met any of these atheists, what the fuck does that say? Nothing. You say, well, the people in my city are really religious. You're actually not qualified to say that, unless you've surveyed your city. The way you feel about your environment only tells something about you. It's not an actual indicator, or it doesn't actually inform you about the state of your community, because we have biases. We have what's the availability heuristic. And so it's the information you're thinking of because it's the information that's most important to you. But I can promise you, pastors aren't shaking in their boots because they're winning, you know and again, most of us know this. All right. So, but I did find this was interesting because this is something that I've been saying for years. And so, and that's compared to 59% of white respondents. So 59% of white people who don't believe in a God will feel comfortable calling themselves atheists, while 26%, according to this sample survey, of course, because statistics aren't static, they don't exist. It doesn't work like that. But 26% of black folk who don't believe in a God are those are the only ones that only 26% are comfortable, according to this survey, identifying as atheists. And they say that this difference may be related to the fact that black non-religious people are less likely to say they have close friends who identify as atheists. So you have no utility for the label if there's no one else in your social group who has the label. Okay, so if you are a black homosexual, or black trans, and no one else in your social group uses that label, even though you know that label exists, you're going to almost feel uncomfortable with that label as it has not been adopted by your group yet. And to use the label in your group would immediately put a target on you, because this label as language has not been accepted as a valid way of living. And so they're saying that one of the reasons that this could be happening, that black people are uncomfortable calling themselves atheists, is because they don't have anybody in their group that this label would have any positive correlation with. you know um And this is why I'm very adamant about describing myself as an atheist. Even though when I say I'm a humanist, that really gives you more insight into who I am and where I stand. And people have asked me about that. Well, why do you choose to call yourself an atheist as opposed to this? Well, number one, because motherfucker, I'm me. It amazes, like, how long do you have to live before you stop being shocked that other people will come to different conclusions than you, that other people will do things that you didn't do? And it's one of those things that I don't like when people do, because people have tried to do it on Facebook and they've tried to do it in my YouTube comments. Well, why do you call yourself this? You should call yourself this. I ain't got to do shit. I call myself what I want to call me, right? And I do it for very real reasons. I do it for my community. Right. And so if you don't understand it, I get it. You don't have to understand it. If you don't agree with it, I get it. You don't have to agree with it. What do I have? What does me calling myself something have anything to do? How does that have anything to do with you? And ultimately it's just like, well, you should call yourself this because I call myself this. And if you don't call yourself this, then you're not being me. And it's like, well, no, duh, bitch, I'm not you. Like, come on, man. We got to do better than that. Um, but no, this is why I absolutely use the label atheist so that people are more comfortable with it. Um, Especially in my community. Uh, I I can tell you where the majority of the atheists are in the black church if you're curious, because there are a lot of atheists in the black church. The majority of them are musicians. You know, any of the musicians who don't really like become preachers and stuff, they're atheists. They're there because they love the music. And if you talk to many pastors, you will find out that this is a common phenomenon because many pastors have gotten so paranoid about this that they constantly have to check in with their music department to see what their beliefs are because there were so many non-believers in our music department because music is just universal. Many people tolerate the bullshit of the church because of the music. But yeah, actually, my drummer, one of my drummers for my former church, and this is after I had stopped pastoring. I hadn't told anybody I was an atheist or anything like that. I was still playing those cards very close to my chest. The only person who really knew what was my wife, and I was hanging out with my drummer, and we was sitting out. I don't know if we was eating. We might have just been smoking. But yeah, so we were hanging out, and we were talking about something. We started talking about space and just the universe. And he was just like, man, and it just in a moment, just of clarity. And I'd been this guy's pastor for probably about 5 years by that time. And I had stopped pastoring then, but he was still hanging out with me. And he said, you know what, man, I just got to be honest with you. I don't think nobody up there. You know, he would not have used the word atheist to describe himself. But he absolutely wouldn't have felt safe having that conversation with anybody else either. So nobody else would have even known. And I'm saying that's how many people in the US, not just black people who actually are non-believers, but because we're all out here and yeah, I'm gonna do it. The secular community is filled with a lot of people who are just arguing for the fucking sake of arguing where hey, I'm a community guy, so this is the type of shit that I speak to. And I'm like, and again, the proof is that there are people in the atheist community who would jump on your post and say, well, why did you do this instead of this? You should do this. And my question is always, okay, what's the utility? If I do that, what has that changed? Who has that helped? Why the fuck are we doing this? you know and so I really do wish sometimes that we'd move away from arguing about shit that doesn't matter so we can actually start, like it's super to me, it's super duper disingenuous, to just keep saying, oh, project 2025 is so bad, and you don't have a fucking project 2025. Like, what the fuck? No, we should be doing shit. We should be organizing. We should be, and I've called this stuff out about the secular community. It's great that we can call out all of the bullshit that religions do, but damn, it would be nice if we would start, building places for abandoned children. It would be nice if we started building organizations that took care of the homeless instead of just ragging on believers while they're still doing that stuff, which is allowing them to indoctrinate people further. because we're all too busy playing golf and hacky sack and shit like that. And I'm not saying anything's wrong with golf or hacky sack. I have plenty of neighbors who do all of that. But what I am saying is stop acting like you're scared of a problem if you're not willing to do something about it. Your fear serves no purpose then. And if the only thing you're willing to do about it is vote, then I pity you. Like, if we're going to be, the biggest thing that we're seeing from this survey even is that people need community. But it's not just people need community because they need to be free from religious superstition. Community is a solution to alleviating the strains of poverty, to alleviating the strains of homelessness. Right now, the religious people are leading when it comes to charity. And it's mainly because they're willing to organize. So, I mean, if you can find a way to get it done without organizing, I'd love to see it. I'd be very interested in that strategy. But until then, you will constantly hear me reminding all of us to organize and to start building local communities where you are. Okay, sorry. Combined, these factors make the U.S. Secular Survey particularly ill-suited to capture robust data about Black non-religious people. First, the survey screened for non-religious status by asking respondents whether they identified with various non-religious identity labels. Second, the survey was spread primarily through social media, often through personal contacts who took the survey or by local secular organizations. Because Black non-religious people are less likely to identify as atheists and less likely to have friends who identify as atheists, even if they are non-religious, our data likely reflects an unusual minority subset. These factors do not make the data on Black non-religious people acquired through the survey invalid, of course, but they should help inform our understanding of who is being included. Black non-religious people who are well connected to secular groups and identify with non-religious labels, and who is less likely to be included, the majority of the Black non-religious population. I hope that makes sense right there, right? So the thing that they wanted to to point out, which I consider this highly responsible, is that even with all the data we're getting, because of what we're understanding from the data, what we now know is that the data we're getting is from Black people who are already well connected to secular groups and identify with non-religious labels. And we know that the majority of Black non-religious people are not included in this because they don't identify with those non-religious labels, right? Oh man, this is so good. And so that kind of should kind of frame some of the comments that I shared, the quotes that I shared in the first episode from this series, and some of the quotes that I've shared in this one, because that means these quotes are coming from people who do already identify as atheists and are already a part of secular communities, and they're still saying this is the experience for me, you know. And then just to also just kind of piggyback on this point of not using that A word. I've been an atheist for a decade. I just started describing myself as that within the past 3 years, and just started describing myself publicly as that this year. And so I knew in 2014 I no longer believed in God, but the language didn't go. I am now an atheist. I was, but it was not a part of my vocabulary. It was not a part of my social lexicon, you know. And I think that's and so that is why I do prominently call myself an atheist. Atheism is prominently featured in all of my content because that's what I want to do for atheism, what Neil deGrasse Tyson has done for astrophysics. I want to normalize it and I want to popularize it. That's my goal. So I can't do that by running from the word, you know. And I also don't like the idea of letting words just define everything. Like, words, well, let's not use atheism because it only tells us this, but it's still accurate. So if it's still accurate, we can still use it. So yes, I am more than one thing. That's like saying, well, don't use African because, you're American. Well, I'm both, bruh. So Don't use atheist because you're a humanist. I'm an atheist humanist, you know? So, all right. So where was I at here? Yep. The reticence to identify as an atheist is not surprising. Research focusing on Black non-religious Americans show that they face a higher social cost for identification with this label than any other groups. I remember my last mentor, when I first started working with him in his ministry, and their church was in Birmingham, which is about 3.5 hours from where I am. And I would drive up there weekly and spend time, not weekly, well, sometimes, yeah, it was about damn near every 2 weeks. But I'd drive up there and spend time with him and his team a lot. And I do remember, like, he had this incredible MD, which is a music director, director of music at the church, an incredible MD. Man could play the keys like nobody's business, and could program all types of click tracks into them and stuff. Just absolutely phenomenal. And then one day it came to surface that while having a conversation with, while the musicians were having a conversations with some of the singers, okay, um, he had let slip that he had a different view of God than they did, and that he wasn't necessarily bought into the whole idea of Jesus as the Son of God, and or even God as a creator. And so I think his views were a little more pantheistic at the time. And the people on the singing team, praise team, took that information back to the pastor, and bruh man lost his job. And I don't know if you've ever been a musician at a mega church, but it's good money. And he lost his job. And unlikely, or likely, not only did he lose his job, but I'm almost positive that that word begin to circulate quite quickly. That, hey, this guy is not even a Christian, you know, as if that changes anything about his ability to play. And that was the thing that used to bother me the most, because I'm like, okay, well, he wasn't a Christian 3 weeks ago in that Sunday service where you said the Lord was moving through him. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, apparently, God ain't got no issue with the brother. You know, make the same mumbo jumbo happen there that you can make happen here. All right, so I gotta hurry up through this. Um, Here's another quote. I wish I could be out as an atheist, but um, I don't feel my friends and family would understand it. I feel that I would be ostracized and mistreated if they knew I didn't believe in any gods. And that's a male from Virginia. And remember, these are people who are connected to community. You know, I got a little bit more to get through here. Somebody else says, being African American, I usually find myself shut out of activities with other African Americans um, because of my lack of belief. And that is so true. So many people will point out how many events that are targeted African American, even if they're just like sinful events, will still have this presupposition or just that kind of shadow of Christianity over it, or religion. Stereotypes about the religiosity of Black people reflect a deeper truth. Religion plays a profound role in Black communities and history. Non-religious Black people who choose to adopt the stigmatized atheist label may be distanced from the social support of their communities and even be seen as rejecting their race and cultural identity. And I can't go into this long, but I am going to do a video on that. I think once they start critically engaging, many of them will find that that social support was illusionary anyway. If social support existed in any significant way in our communities, then our communities would not be in the condition that they are in. And so that's like the double-edged sword of that. You're staying in for social support, but you're not actually getting real social support because your idea of social support is steeped in superstition. I used a lot of S's there. All right. So our data reflects this sense of isolation felt by many Black non-religious people. Black survey participants were more likely to feel lonely and more likely to conceal their non-religious identity, and they faced a higher level of stigma than other participants. As a result, they were significantly more likely to be depressed. However, our data also shows the resilience of this community. Black participants were significantly more likely than other participants to be involved with local secular organizations, and those connected to national and local secular organizations reported better psychological outcomes. However, the fact that that Black non-religious people are less likely than others to use non-religious labels to describe their beliefs may impede community building and undermine the well-being of this population. For example, Black non-religious people who do not recognize non-religious labels as salient parts of their identities are less likely to be able to find supportive local groups of non-religious people, since local groups are organized around these labels. Hence, again, this is why I use the words, is so that Black people can say, oh yeah, we can use that word. That word is in our zeitgeist now. We have Black atheists out here. But I want you to even notice, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, super brilliant man, but he's also impacted by that stigma. He's also said that he doesn't always feel comfortable describing himself as an atheist, even though he'll be the first one to say that it's an accurate depiction of who I am, you know. But he knows how stigmatizing it is in our community. And not just our community, other people view us that way too, you know. So when white people, even if they're non-religious, find out that Black people are not religious, it almost makes them feel like, oh snap, this he's going to be a criminal then, you know. But by working to overcome this identification gap, the broader secular community can both improve the lives of Black non-religious constituents and better engage with this population. This can be achieved by increasing exposure to Black atheists, promoting disclosure of non-religious labels in Black communities to normalize atheism, and reducing the social cost for Black non-religious people to identify as atheists, and increasing the benefits for doing so. And that is the work that I am doing on this channel. And that is absolutely the work that Black non-believers have been doing for over a decade. And so again, if you didn't hear me the first time, if you're able to support them, please do. The giving links are in the description. In many Black communities, atheism is seen as a white cultural phenomenon. This is unsurprising given that 78% of atheists in the US are white. And white people, often white men, tend to be overrepresented in many local secular groups, particularly in leadership. However, there are steps that secular organizations can and should take to be more welcoming to Black non-religious people. Our organizations must be willing to confront racism and white supremacy, both within the secular community and beyond. Groups should engage with intersectional issues that most impact Black non-religious people, and we should recognize that a commitment to increasing diversity means that our groups and the secular movement as a whole must be willing to accept change. So, that's our little spill for today. I'll jump into some of this again next week. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hate to rush off, but I do have to go. But I'm looking forward to doing more of this and having more of these conversations. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell. Consider joining our community. We'd love to see you in some of the conversations that we're having in Discord. And then, of course, check out our merch because it's dope as fuck. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, I love y'all so much. Until next time, keep rising, stay progressive, and if you can, stay beautiful. I'll holler at you later.